Around 5 years ago, I created another new project in Unity. Unknown to me at the time, this was the start of a 5-year-long journey, spending thousands of hours developing a video game called Xmode and releasing it on Steam. In this video, I'm going to look back at Xmode's development journey and recap what went into it from the beginning to release. I'll be reflecting on what I did in the past, explaining why I did certain things, and on some occasions, what I would have done differently. Going back to around April 2020, I had already spent the previous 5 years learning the Unity game engine by making many video game projects, but I hadn't actually fully released a game yet. At this time, I was in my first year of university and stumbled upon a YouTube series about how to implement your own multiplayer networking in Unity by Tom Weiland. I'd actually previously made a multiplayer game in Unity using Unet, which I think I learned from watching Bracky's tutorial series. Keep in mind though, I was only in high school at that time and I don't think I fully understood all the networking concepts I was implementing. So this old multiplayer game project eventually was just put on my pile of abandoned Unity projects. But watching this multiplayer networking series by Tom Weiland gave me a renewed interest in making a multiplayer game again. I think the original idea was to remake my old multiplayer game but better, and I wanted to try my best to fully understand all the networking concepts required to make a multiplayer game. So I started implementing the basic features of an FPS multiplayer game like player movement, player animations, gun shooting, reloading, and player health. I even started on a backend system using Firebase for saving user account data. Then I decided to release an update video on YouTube to show off what I was working on. Hello guys, welcome to my first video on my current Unity project. And from here on, I've kept implementing more features and uploading more update videos to show them off. After watching this recap video, if you want more, I suggest you go binge watch this playlist to watch all my update videos and to see the full journey in chronological order. Early on in the project, I had made the decision that the game would have a flat shaded low poly art style, so little to no textures and no smooth shaded models, all mesh edges sharply visible. I had become comfortable making assets in this style, and so it just made sense to continue with it. Even though I personally like the look of a low poly art style in video games, this might have been a mistake though. Unfortunately, people often see video games with low poly art styles as low effort games or asset flips. Although I know this is not the case with Xmode because I've personally created 99% of the assets, many people that see the game for the first time will most likely not know that. In the end though, I'm still really happy with how the low poly art style I used in Xmode turned out, and hopefully it doesn't deter too many people. I do want to challenge myself to experiment with different art styles in my next project though. In July 2020, I finally committed the project into source control. I don't know why it took me a few months to do it, but if you're starting a new project, just always make sure to use source control. Of course, it's necessary when working with a team, but it also just makes sure all your hard work is backed up, and you can always roll back if a mistake is made. I like to think of it as a giant undo button. It also gives the added benefit of being able to look back at all the progress that was made on a project, and when exactly those changes were committed. Like just look at this beautiful GitHub commit chart of Xmode's repository. 700 plus commits over the past 5 years. I think this is a good time to mention that Xmode has just been a hobby game dev project. Throughout its development, I was always either studying software engineering full-time in university or working a full-time job, which meant that I usually only spent a few hours a week developing Xmode. At some points, I even took longer breaks to focus on my studies. I think this is the main reason why this project has taken me 5 years, but I also think this was a good thing. The fact that I only worked on the project when I had time and actually felt like working on it meant I was always enjoying working on the project and I almost never felt burnt out. Which is why whenever someone asked me when the next update video was or when the next playtest would be, I always answered with, when it's ready, because I never had a set timeline for anything in this project. In many cases, this is not a good idea. It can introduce scope creep and make the project go on forever with no clear end in sight. But Xmode was just a hobby project to me, so although an undefined timeline is not ideal, this was just how it turned out to go. By the end of August 2020, I had the first iteration of a full game loop implemented. The original idea for Xmode was to create a multiplayer FPS game with multiple different game modes to choose from. I had this idea where in between rounds, everyone would spawn in a world space lobby where they can vote for the next game mode they want to play. This was actually inspired by Minecraft minigame servers I played on growing up like Mineplex and Hypixel. Similar to those Minecraft minigame servers, the idea was that Xmode would have multiple FPS-oriented game modes. February 2021 was the first time we playtested Xmode. The purpose of these playtests were for me to gather feedback directly from players throughout development. That way I could figure out what was good about Xmode and what still needed improvement. Playtesters also helped me find lots of bugs so I could fix them along the way. I think the most concurrent players we had at a given time was around 25 players. The real test will come at release when Xmode hopefully gets a decent concurrent player count, although there was one huge issue we noticed during the first few Xmode playtests: latency. Latency is like the final boss of multiplayer game development. Since players could be playing from anywhere in the world, there will always be a delay in the connection between the game server and other player clients. This causes issues with syncing game state that needs to be as close to real time as possible, like player movement or hit detection. Most of the common networking libraries for Unity have built-in systems that handle these latency issues. Concepts like client-side prediction or collider rollback are used to mitigate the effects of latency in video game networking. Xmode is using Riptide networking for its multiplayer networking library, which is the end result of Tom Weiland's open-source networking journey. The thing is, Riptide is a lower-level networking library and does not include any built-in systems to handle latency. And that's on purpose. Since it's a lower-level networking library, you need to implement almost everything on your own. There are benefits to this though. The library is not bloated with uncommonly used features, and it allows you to implement these systems exactly how you want to fit your exact needs. Or in my case, one of the original goals of this project was to try and fully understand the networking concepts required to make a multiplayer game, and so learning how to implement these systems myself was part of the fun. I do think this is another reason why this project has taken so long though. Implementing these systems from almost scratch takes a lot of extra effort, and I didn't really know what I was doing most of the time, so it took lots of trial and error, but that was all part of the learning process. Over the next 2 years, I implemented multiple networking systems in Xmode. A tick system and a client-side prediction system was implemented to make multiplayer movement feel smooth and responsive. Player input has now been predicted on the client side and then validated for its correctness on the server side, which kept input latency to a minimum. A collider rollback system was implemented to allow for proper hit detection when shooting guns. Player collider states are kept in a buffer and their state is rolled back to the exact tick that a gunshot was taken to calculate more accurate hit detection. Lastly, lots of networking optimizations were made to ensure as many players could play together on the same server as possible before the game server starts becoming the bottleneck. Hopefully all these networking systems hold up. They're definitely far from perfect, but work very well considering I built them myself. Here's another mistake I made early on in the project. Xmode's Unity project is actually 2 Unity projects, one for the client and one for the server. Which means during development I needed to maintain 2 Unity projects, each with their own codebases. Which was definitely a mistake because 2 instances of Unity open always made my PC run slower, and I had to maintain 2 codebases with lots of duplicate code between them. Ignoring the fact that my code is definitely spaghetti code after 5 years of changes, I essentially had to write certain parts of the code twice or copy-paste between codebases, which was time-consuming and was prone to create bugs caused by logic not being identical on both server and client. And if you're wondering how I synced Unity scene layouts, I used Unity asset packages to move a prefab of all the common game objects in a scene from the client project to the server project. Scenes in the server project are then stripped of all shaders and materials since they run in headless mode, so there's no need to render anything. I think the reason why this happened is that when I first started the project, I was following Tom's networking tutorial series which used 2 Unity projects, and I also don't think I knew what conditional compilation was 5 years ago. If I were to start again today, I would definitely only have 1 Unity project and use conditional compilation to only compile certain parts of the codebase for server and client builds. Unfortunately, I didn't really realize that 2 Unity projects was a mistake until I was years into development, so converting to a single Unity project would have been a lot of work. So I just never did it and lived with the downsides. It was now September 2022 and Xmode was starting to feel like an actual game. It had all the traditional FPS mechanics and features, and content-wise there were 3 maps: Valley, Ship, and Testing Grounds, 4 game modes: Free-for-all, Team Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, and Infection.
What was that?
And multiple gun, melee, and throwable items to select in your loadout. Playtests also seemed to suggest that Xmode was fun to play. It was time to start thinking about what I wanted to do next with this project. This is the point where I really started to realize that X mode was just another FPS game. Multiple playtests of X mode had happened at this point, and a common worry I had was, why would anyone even play X mode? There are so many other great FPS games out there that offer the same or better gameplay mechanics. So at this point I was trying to figure out if I should continue on the project because would anyone actually want to play it? Thinking back to the beginning again, to me, the purpose of this project was to develop a multiplayer game and learn as much as I could while doing it. So with that in mind, I decided to keep working on X mode, as long as I was enjoying it. To me, the goal of the project was in the journey, not the final outcome. If I do end up releasing X mode and X mode did attract a player base, that would just be a bonus achievement. That being said though, I still wanted the end result of X mode to be as good as I could make it, so it was actually worth playing. I didn't want to just release a game that was not polished or set up to be a success, so there was still lots of work to be done. X mode actually didn't get the name X mode until April 2023 when its Steam page was published. I could now start collecting wishlists and running my playtests through the Steam playtesting feature, which by the way works great for multiplayer games. For the next 2 years, I narrowed my scope and focused on implementing features, systems, and content I really felt X mode needed before an official release on Steam. I implemented localization so X mode could be played in multiple languages, added Steam achievements to unlock, implemented Steam networking so players could host their own games and easily play with their friends, allowed for XP to be earned from playing, which then levels up your player, started tracking player stats like kills, deaths, and assists, which could be viewed on a global leaderboard. More items to choose from, an attachment system to switch gun sights, 3 more game modes, race, yes, I added electric unicycle racing, I don't know why, but I did, elimination, and point hold. 2 more maps, Space Station, and Mountain Temple. One feature I was a bit scared to try and implement was AI bots. I felt like it would be good for X mode to have AI bots in case its player base count remained low, so players could at least play against bots. But these bots needed to actually be fun to play against. The AI bots use a state machine for their decision making, combined with a custom navigation agent that uses the Unity navmesh system for pathfinding and navigating around the maps. They're decently fun to play against, and most of the playtest feedback I got about them was positive. One of the last major systems I implemented in X mode was a cosmetic system. You can customize how your player character appears or make your items look unique by changing skins. X mode will cost money to run official servers, so it needs a revenue stream in order to be sustainable. Since X mode is a free-to-play game, I thought the best alternative revenue stream would be to offer paid cosmetics that players could purchase individually, and also offer an X mode supporter edition, which will just unlock all the paid cosmetics. I see this as a way for players to support the development of X mode, and as a bonus, get cool cosmetics to show off in game. But of course, I still wanted to offer lots of free cosmetics as well, which could be unlocked by just playing and increasing your player level. At this point, all the major systems I felt X mode needed for its release were ready. X mode is now free to play on Steam. If you join me anytime along my X mode game development journey, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a play. Thanks for watching, Zippy out.